Hey guys, this is Josh from the Grapplezilla Podcast, and today I am honored to have a very good friend of mine who is a master martial artist, master grappler, runs an amazing podcast, Bryan Roig of PCI Jiujitsu. He also runs the Level Up Grappling Podcast, which is one of the biggest grappling podcasts in the United States and the world. He has an incredible background. He is highly educated, incredibly intelligent. He is a man of his own direction, and this is what I love about the guy. Bryan, how you doing? Welcome.
Brother? Thank you. This is awesome. It
truly is. Now, I want to explain, Bryan, why do I really, really listen to when Bryan talks is because this is a guy who is your third or fourth degree black belt Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu?
Third degree BJJ black belt under Chris Haueter, which is a solid background. He has a Luta Livre background, heavy catch wrestling background, as heavy as it gets, kickboxing background, Dutch style. He originally came from Hapkido as well, which I'm a big fan of in the traditional arts. Judo, Blackbelt, SAW, which is submission arts wrestling, and Pankration and more. He has 1 or 2 degrees in religious studies in university. 2 degrees. He's a thinker. He's definitely an empirical evidence type of person. And let's pick his brain and see what he can teach us today. Yeah.
So listen, Bryan, I want to ask you a question. Catch wrestling.
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of catch, and I get a lot of guys asking me, what is catch? And I think they're getting the wrong message from social media, from certain channels that I don't think is really purveying to people what catch is. Like, I think most people come and say, oh, that pro wrestling stuff. Right. So explain to me what is catch, and it isn't pro wrestling. And tell us about it.
Well, let's put it like this. Well, first, let's just define what we describe as pro wrestling, just so we can kind of just leave that out completely. I think that's really important.
Good.
To me, professional wrestling as it's expressed today in the 21st century is modern theatrical physical violence. So it's a predetermined outcome, right? They know who's going to win the match ahead of time. It is very physical. I know plenty of pro wrestlers that have gotten severely injured, multiple surgeries. You have to be very athletic to do it.
For sure.
But it is theatrical based, and it is not. It is, while it has its toes dipped into physical violence and martial arts, it's much more cartoon theatrics and very exaggerated. It's very exaggerated form of physical theater. So it's physical theater. Now, physical theater has been around since time immemorial. If you look back at ancient feudal Japan, you would have what's called kabuki theater, where samurais would get up and they would have these very elaborate displays of war and fighting on stage, but they weren't really killing each other. It was just they were displaying a physical theater. So physical theater, as we know it, has been around since humans have been around. At the same time, the other thing that's been around since humans have been around has been wrestling, particularly combat style wrestling, where people have the misunderstanding is what happened in the early 20th century when submissions were actually taken out of amateur wrestling. So basically, prior to 1904, wrestling around the world had submissions. Wrestling as we know it, freestyle wrestling, in the United States, we have folk style as well, had submissions. So this is the term catch as catch can. That term originally came from basically England, and Europe. And all it means is whatever you can get, finish them with that. So whatever submission you can get, be it an arm, a leg, or a neck, go ahead and finish it. Now, back then, there were some regions that were extremely violent in their catch style, where they allowed what's called fish hooking, where the fingers are in the mouth, eye pokes, eye gouges, where they would literally just be clawing to get your eyes out, all kinds of wild stuff. So it had to be pared down a little bit. Then there was kind of like this evolution to what you would call, like, say, a rough and tumble style, where there was the boxing element that was added into the submission wrestling. So you look at the ancient Greeks. The ancient Greeks were doing, as what we call today, catch wrestling. They were already doing it. Egyptians were doing it. It was done in Babylon. It was done in India. It was done all over the world. So this is not new. It's anything but new. It's our original identity. Our original, wrestling identity is wrestling with submissions. What a lot of people don't know is, like, in certain parts of the world, they'd be wrestling in the nude. And they would use the genitals as a handle. So imagine that. You're wrestling and then somebody grabs your junk and they're using that to throw you and pull you down and snap you into a front headlock. That's real. That's what it was. Now, obviously, we don't do that anymore, and we wear clothing. But violence is part of our DNA as humans. It is what it is. And given that, we have various styles and interpretations of the violence when we are engaged in each other physically, right? You have the art of war, which may be sticks and stones, arrows, rockets, guns, drones. When we come to one-on-one physical combat, you have hand-to-hand combat. You may be armed or unarmed. So when we take unarmed physical combat, hand-to-hand, you have basically elements of grappling, which is stand-up and ground grappling, and also striking. So when you eliminate the striking, right, you have two aspects of grappling, which is stand-up grappling, which is very important because 100% of fights start standing. And then you have the ground grappling, which may or may not finish on the ground. They may get up, they may be shot, they may be stabbed. Anything could happen once you're on the ground. It's very dangerous. So as we look at what catch wrestling is, it's nothing new. This is just our original identity in terms of all submissions are legal wrestling. And the term no holds barred was originally developed in Europe back in the day, when you would have different champions, regional champions, going to challenge each other. And there would be champions saying, I will wrestle you in this match, but here are the holds that I do not allow in my matches. So some may not allow a strangle. Some may not allow a leg lock. Some, they all had different holds that they would be barred from. So what would be considered like the champions match, the champion of champions match, is when it would be NHB, or no holds barred. That would mean you are as the UFC, the BMF title. That's the baddest motherfucker in the area, because they don't care what you're doing. So that's what we have. And then as that evolved, you have regions in the world that they wore kimono, right? It's very common. Or you have different outfits, and that's just cultural representation of grappling. Doesn't mean that it's a new invention, that all of a sudden grappling becomes a new invention. What happens is the rule set and your attire, your grappling attire, dictates how you grip, how you grab, how you may turn your hips, how you throw somebody, how you hold them on the ground, these types of things. So then you see over time different styles of martial arts coming out: karate, jiu-jitsu, the jiu-jitsu that was prior to judo, Jigoro Kano's judo, and then from there you had what we have today, the Brazilian, different types of Brazilian jiu-jitsu. It's not one. Everybody thinks it was the Gracies. The Gracies never invented anything. So there were multiple styles and interpretations of Brazilian interpretations of judo, and the Gracies were one of them. That's just the most popular one right now. But it all really stems from submission-based wrestling, which is catch wrestling.
So that said, and I actually agree with everything you said there. I think it is who we are. I think wrestling, like it feels natural. You take two kids, they're in a room, they're going to start wrestling, and they're going to naturally move with their biomechanics to pin and to quarter Nelson, half Nelson pin. Like, what do they know what they're doing? No, it's in us. It's our genes.
Right.
That said, why is catch having such a, I think not now, but let's say the last 10 years in comparison to jiu-jitsu, why is it having a much slower pace of growth compared to jiu-jitsu?
I think it's just the marketing, because if you look at it, if you're jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu is defined by them as, a form of submission grappling with a gi on. The minute you take the gi off, if you want to title it as something Brazilian, it's Luta Livre. And Luta Livre is Brazilian catch wrestling. It is catch wrestling. So the biggest tournaments in the world are actually catch wrestling tournaments, just without a pin. ADCC, CJI, a lot of these things, who's number one, fight to win, all these things. If you're not wearing a gi and you're doing submission grappling, you're doing catch. You're just doing no pin catch wrestling. That's all it is.
And where do you think, because I have this conversation with a lot of jiu-jiteros, I myself is also a jiu-jitero, and they always ask me, where does catch complement jiu-jitsu? And I'm going to come around and also say, where does jiu-jitsu complement catch in any way?
Yeah. So I have friends that say, as an example, I can say for myself, catch made my jiu-jitsu 10 times better. Like, it accelerated me. Part of my story is it took me 10 years to go from white to purple belt. Okay. That's Chris Haueter held me that long, and that's fine, because at the end of the day, your journey of belts and all this nonsense, it's based on your personal development. And I wouldn't have had it any other way, because I wasn't going to a school where they just had a time card and you just check the time, they get checked off on the time card, and you automatically get promoted. Chris Haueter was very detailed in terms of making sure my development was the best I could be, not how I was compared to somebody else. And so he held me back until he saw me really going after and mauling people. And where that development kicked in was when I added the catch wrestling. So when I was able to start training with Billy Robinson, that's what took me. I started, get this, my first camp with Billy Robinson, within a month, I became a purple belt.
That's amazing.
And then going purple to black, I flew. I think it was 4 years between purple and black.
That's good.
Yeah. Because I was just spending the time with Billy, and I was spending the time in Japan training with Fujiwara and different Japanese catch wrestlers, and studying all these different things, studying and training under the SAW system, submission arts wrestling, which is a different style of Japanese catch wrestling. So I took a very different approach in life. I'm not rich by any stretch of the imagination. Anytime I had a job, I obviously am still gainfully employed, but prior to me ever having kids, I spent all my money on grappling and lessons. So I would fly all over the world to train with the best people in the world. I spent a lot of money on privates and on this. And, people talk now oh, I spend $200 a month or $300 a month on jiu-jitsu. I was spending upwards of $1,400 a month in training. I was I'd rather eat once a day and train than not. So getting to your question, sorry, I'm a little long-winded because I really want to kind of get people to understand. So here's the thing. I'm going to tell you how they complement each other, because I think it's important for everybody to learn both. Okay. Number one, if you really analyze, well, what does Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or Gracie Jiu-Jitsu bring to the table? What did they bring to the table? It's literally one thing and one thing only, because they didn't invent anything. It's the time spent on your back, which is the complete opposite of what a wrestler does. Wrestler, we don't want to spend time on our back. We want to get up. How I train my students, I don't want you on your back. I want you to get up. Now, the caveat to that is I train my students to be confident on their back, but not lazy, comfortable on their back. Because again, because I was trained by Chris Haueter, that's my foundation. It's be the person on top. Win on top, stay on top. Rule number 3, have a guard you shall not pass, right? Have a guard where if you can stand up, but don't sit in the guard. Have a sense of urgency to get up.
Yeah.
So because of that, one of the glaring issues I see with the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, particularly like this, say the sport Jiu-Jitsu, is they have zero stand-up. And they don't know how to drill. They really don't know how to drill. Everybody wants to roll, they just they'll learn the technique for 5 minutes, then they just want to roll around, which is completely the opposite. If you go into any wrestling room in the country, around the world, how many matches do they have compared to drills?
No, they have much more time that they work on. And even the term drill, around the world, if you go to the East, drill, they'll say this is a good drill, and the term will be switched with exercise. So it could be like arm drag and using a rubber band to it and then moving to someone later, and that's a drill, right? Yeah.
So, and that's my point. I think what gets lost in jiu-jitsu is they spend so much time rolling around with each other. They have no idea the finesse it takes to learn micro movements and also the stand-up. So stand-up grappling is, number 1, in my opinion, king. You have to learn stand-up grappling. Everything starts from the standing position. If you look back at UFC 1, those shots that Royce Gracie was taking on his opponents would not work on a good, strong wrestler if they had allowed a wrestler in. I don't even think, like, if you have, I look at my students, it wouldn't work on any of my white belts. I have brown belts from other gyms come in, try and take my students down, and they can't. Because we spend so much time actually wrestling. Doesn't matter if we're wearing a gi or not a gi. 3 days a week I'm in a gi, 3 days a week I'm not in a gi. But we spend so much time on stand-up. Half of all my classes are in stand-up drills. Okay, stand-up, wrestling, grappling, hand fighting, footwork. I am so obsessed with footwork. And this is something else that jiu-jitsu doesn't have that wrestling does have, catch wrestling and wrestling. I'm lumping wrestling and catch wrestling together because catch wrestling is wrestling. It's just submission.
I agree.
Okay. So what jiu-jitsu could really learn from catch wrestling is skeletal muscle attacks, joint pins, and the stand-up. And what jiu-jitsu could contribute to catch wrestling, because I see this all the time with guys that claim to be catch wrestlers and just catch wrestlers, a lot of catch wrestlers in general, is catch wrestlers could have more flow to their game.
Okay, I get it.
So
like a yin and yang.
It's a yin and yang. Like if somebody rolls with me or they watch me, they go, I can't figure out your style. What is it? Because I'm a very flowy catch wrestler. So I feel like there's a lot of stuff where they're like, well, how come you're just not leaving like real heavy? Like I don't use a lot of strength. My shoulders are shot. I have a lot of physical, injuries, which don't allow me to, like, I can't, at my age, I can't compete with some 23-year-old, whatever, it's not going to work. So I have to be very specific about how I'm moving around. And the thing that I notice is, number 1, I don't like forcing anything. Billy Robinson always used to say, if you don't have the submission within 5 seconds, you don't have it, go back to your previous control point. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's the rule that I have at my gym. If you don't have it, move on. So there's they can both serve each other. I don't see them as mutually exclusive. That's why I call my system a hybrid grappling system. Now it's catch wrestling. The foundation is catch wrestling. But even when you look at Chris Haueter's jiu-jitsu style, if anybody cares to look it up, it's catch wrestling in a gi. He doesn't do a lot of sport jiu-jitsu. He doesn't do a lot of stuff on the back. He can play on the back really well. But if he gets up, he dictates when he wants to get up. If he gets up and he's on top of you, you're not transitioning out of that. So I think there's a lot that they can learn from each other. I think definitely more so the jiu-jitsu side, they can learn a lot more from catch. It's just the finesse. I would like to see also some more finesse with some of the catch wrestlers, and not be so. The only word I can use that it makes sense to me is blocky. A lot of their stuff is very blocky, where they're going. Think of it like this, like Muay Thai almost. When you look at Muay Thai kickboxing compared to Dutch style, Muay Thai, Thai Muay Thai, it's 1-for-1, right? I kick, you kick. I kick, you kick. I punch, you punch, like that. Dutch style is very rapid fire. It's much more aggressive and it's more combination based, right? So there's a flow to the Dutch striking, which doesn't exist in Muay Thai. So similarly, I look at a lot of catch wrestling, not all, but there's a lot of guys that come up in catch wrestling where it's very blocky, where they're waiting for the other guy to do something. He's like, okay, I'm going to go here. I'm going to set my position in my quarters position. I'm going to hold you here. Wait for the guy to transition out. No, don't transition out. Choke him. There's guys that, like, there's a guy in England who is a very popular catch wrestling coach. He doesn't allow submissions, or he doesn't allow chokes in his tournament or in his training, in his gym. And as a result, people think that there's no chokes in catch wrestling. That's not true. In certain rule sets, there weren't strangles or chokes, but it doesn't mean that there's no chokes. That's where they came from. But yeah, they can both learn from each other. Absolutely.
Do you find that there's a lot of not cohesion, but a lot of resistance towards people even wanting to learn catch? It's like they want to, but they're afraid what their coach will say, or they come with excuses and they're just blocking. They're screwing themselves over. Do you find that?
Oh, absolutely. A lot of that is just the political dynamic. Whereas in jiu-jitsu, you have everybody's got their own little kingdom, and they're so afraid of losing students to something cool that they're like, you can't train here, you can't train there. That still exists. Or you can only go to a seminar if it's one of our affiliations. It's like nonsense like that. Or that stuff doesn't work. And a lot of it, the misunderstanding with catch is you do have certain people out there that are so pro wrestling heavy, and they're promoting it as, oh yeah, well, we're part of pro wrestling. And it really kind of dissolves what we're doing. Or they have instructional videos out there that they're showing pro wrestling moves, or what I call show holds, which there's no way it would work if you're actually wrestling. And these are people that have never grappled a day in their life. They just learned a bunch of quote unquote catch wrestling show holds, or basically pro wrestling moves, and being like, look how cool this is. You should add this to your jiu-jitsu. But it doesn't work. So why do it if it doesn't work? Actual catch wrestling is there's so much details to the mechanics. It's very important. So, I do seminars all the time. I do clinics almost every month at my gym. And, I call it the home of the $20 clinic. And I have people come to me, they're like, Coach, you're charging way too little for what you're doing. Even Eric Paulson said, you're giving it away for free. What are you doing? Because to me, it's just like, I want people to learn. I really want people to be exposed to something that they haven't thought about. Like when I had a double wrist lock seminar, I got so much hate for people saying, "This is such thing as a double wrist lock. How do you dare say that a Kimura isn't real? Why don't you tell Wagner Rocha that?" I'm like, huh? I go, Wagner Rocha knows that a double wrist lock is what you're calling a Kimura. They're saying it was invented by this Japanese guy, Kimura, did it to Helio Gracie, blah, blah, blah. They follow the mythology. And I had a black belt ask me if a double wrist lock was when you bent your two wrists in. I'm like, how do you not know this? And you're a black belt? And it's not just one person that has said that. I'm singling out one black belt, but it's multiple black belts that have asked me that question. What exactly is a double wrist lock? How are you bending the wrist out? I'm like, wait a minute, what? So just getting them to understand the basics, and like, okay, like I'm doing one, I have one coming up all about cradles. And people go, well, we don't need to learn cradles. We do jiu-jitsu. Well, no, you do need to learn cradles because it's an incredible finishing hold.
Yeah, for sure.
And don't forget, Mark Schultz put Rickson Gracie in a cradle for 30 minutes and he couldn't get out of it. You know, had Mark Schultz had a week of submission training, he would have destroyed Rickson. Within 5 minutes, he would have destroyed Rickson. So, you know, there's a misunderstanding, but also it's this little kingdom. I'm unique in the sense that I'm not tooting my own horn, but I just want to explain how my vision is unique. Number one, I force my students to go to open mats and I force them to go train at other schools. Like, you don't have an option with me. If you're training with me, you're required to go check out other schools and go pay mat fees. I don't care where it is. Drive an hour, drive 20 minutes, whatever. I want you to see what's out there. Because number one, they come back. They go, God, the instruction was horrible. And number two, I want them to test themselves against random people. Because if there's not enough tournaments, right? And let's say we can't make a tournament, it's a great way to have a tournament. Go roll with people you don't know. You know, and then just like figure it out. And then it's just like, wow, coach, it's just like nobody wanted to stand up with me. Yeah, of course they don't want to stand up with you. You know, or there's rules, you know, wrestling from the knees only. I'm like, what? There's no such thing as wrestling from the knees. I've never seen a wrestling match or a fight in my life that started on their knees. You know, it just doesn't make any sense. Okay. So, I have my students compete if they see that there's a good seminar coming up. I'm like, hey, go check it out. And I'm always with the open-minded approach of it. Please take notes, record it if you want. Find something good. If you see something good, bring it back to the gym so we can dissect it and see how it works or if we can apply it. And I've yet to have seen anybody come back with anything where they go, oh, this blew me away.
Yeah.
And we're talking about they're going to like very, very famous people to their seminars. And they're like going, yeah, no. So I think that there's a fear with a lot of students, a lot of teachers, that they do not want to lose their students. So they go, oh no, this is our style. It's a superior style. Don't go anywhere else. Don't train there. You know? So that's what that is. To them, it's just like they want to make a living from it. I don't make a living from coaching. Coaching is my passion. You know, and that's
the best coach.
You know, coaching's my passion.
Yeah.
You know, I'm rare also where I get on my students. If somebody's not in class enough, I'm texting them. The fuck are you doing? You know, I have group chat on Instagram with my students where we're analyzing stuff. What happened here? What was wrong? You know, what was right? My students have 24/7 access to me. You know, if they have a question, they can always call me, ask me, text me, whatever. Send me videos. Let's look at it. So the investment I have in them is not material. And I'd be hard pressed to find another coach that's doing the same thing that I am.
Here's a question. Do you also teach gi and no gi? So you're like full spectrum there, right?
Yes. Yep.
Do you find that, I believe in training both because I think they develop attributes and they work your brain especially. Do you find that, now it's going to go the other way, that a lot of catch wrestlers are against using the gi for just a roll or to train?
No.
And okay.
Mm-mm. It's actually the opposite. They're like, I'll try that.
Okay, that's cool.
You know,
I think that's very cool.
Yeah, it's hard for me to get them to stay in it sometimes, you know. But they'll try it. They're like, oh God, I don't want to do this all the time, but I'll do it. I'm like, put it on. Let's go. Because they all say the same thing. It's hard to get up when you have the gi on. I go, no shit. That's the whole point. When you look at how it's complementary, gi and no gi, I'm going to break it down very simply. If you want to have a really strong top game where you can keep anyone pinned to the ground, train a lot of no gi. But if you want to be able to escape out of anything, you got to train your gi escapes. You got to train with the gi and be on the bottom and get up, wrestle out of the worst pins possible with the
proper
gi
wisdom here.
Okay. Because, dude, the thing that you notice when you're not wearing a gi and you're slippery, you can escape out of anything, and it gives you a false sense of confidence. Similarly, when you have a gi on, it gives you a false sense of confidence in terms of how you can pin somebody to the floor. Because you can hold them down, I can wrap their lapel around, I can do stuff that I can't necessarily do. So to me, it's just like the equal balance is every other day. Now, that being said, I don't teach sport jiu-jitsu. So I don't teach barambolos. I don't teach like all this like super fancy guard stuff. Not that I don't know it, but I just think it's irrelevant. I teach grappling for fighting. I teach combat-based fighting, right? So because of that, I teach you how to wrestle up with a gi on. I teach you how to use the lapel to hit a front headlock. Teach you how to, rip somebody with a front face lock and then if you need to, wrap the tail around to pin them to the floor. These types of things. This is how we use the gi. We use the gi as a weapon for wrestling. We don't use it as a stalling tool to get 2 points in an IBJJF tournament. Very different.
There's something interesting I'd like to just tell the audience, because I went over a bit of your background, but I think, could you tell us, because you have like one of the most interesting martial arts backgrounds. And I think all of this together has given you as well as being an educated man who likes to think for himself, I would say, it gave you a very good perspective. But I do believe that it's also the timeline you did the arts and the era they were done in. Can you go over like how did you get there and everything?
Yeah. So I think what you said, one thing is very key. It's perspective. And I can tie all of this in, even from, my undergrad is in sociology of religion. So it's really learning how people believe what they believe and why. I did a master's in India. I lived in India for 2 years as a monk in an ashram, did a graduate degree in religious studies there. I also have an MBA. So it's really about perspective, because we could all stand around the trunk of a tree and look up and see something different and describe the tree in a different way. Doesn't mean that any of us are incorrect. It's just our perspective from where we're standing. The key is to share the information of you holding hands to the left, somebody else holding hands to the right. What do you see? What do you see? Now, how do we fit together? What is it? Because you don't see that it's a tree when you're standing right up on it. It's a sequoia tree. And it's things so massive, you don't know what it is. You just see this giant brown thing. What is it? So you have to get a full perspective to have that 30,000-foot view. Okay? To really be well-rounded, you have to have a complete perspective. You can't be incomplete. So I grew up in the golden age of the 80s in, San Fernando Valley, which is part of Los Angeles, California. And every weekend I was watching something called Kung Fu Theater, and also a show called Kung Fu with David Carradine. And I watched every Bruce Lee movie imaginable and Chuck Norris and everything. So I was in love with the martial arts, and I wanted to be a monk. I thought, how cool would it be to some kind of like monk where I was just carrying water up the steps, and then the master would come at me and try and hit me with a cane, and I'd have to do these kicks and hold the buckets of water. Like, this is what I wanted to be. I thought this is the coolest thing ever. So in the Valley in the 80s, there wasn't a lot. So I started with, basic karate like everybody else did. And then I graduated to Hapkido. I liked Hapkido because it was a much harder style than karate. It was more physical, and it had throws, because I love Judo. So it had throws, it had joint locks. I learned my first joint locks, arm bars, and all this from Hapkido. I didn't learn it from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. It was in Hapkido first. That's where I saw it. So I did that. As I graduated into Hapkido, I graduated into Judo. There was a Judo club in the San Fernando Valley. They had classes once a week. So you go to the class once a week to go do the Judo. So black belt number 1 was Hapkido. Black belt number 2, shortly after that, was Judo. I evolved as I was doing the Hapkido into the Dutch style of kickboxing. I loved kickboxing, striking, but I liked the Dutch style. I was fortunate enough to have amazing trainers. So in LA, during this time, you had a variety of people that were coming up, and then who magically shows up in the 90s? Well, none other than Bas Rutten. So you had Bas Rutten. Oh, check this out. So I had Bas Rutten, Rob Kamen,
Wow,
and Anthony Hardonk. Those were three of my kickboxing coaches. Okay,
it's like Michael Jordan, Wayne Gretzky, and Joe Montana all together, right?
So this is how I was learning, right? And like I said, I'd rather train than eat. So I was fine, even as a broke college student. I was fine eating once a day, and I remember getting a job at Little Caesars Pizza as a delivery driver. And as your delivery driver, you're allowed to have food. So when I was working as a pizza delivery driver, I'd be driving down to LA to go train, and I was living in Santa Barbara doing all this stuff. I'd have my one meal a day. If I was lucky, I would get some scraps of bread, and I'd make some crazy bread. It was just like just the bread. And I would just save a bag of bread, and I would eat that for the next day and go train. So that's how it was. I just lived on that, and I'd buy a bag of rice. At the time, you could buy it like a 10-pound bag of rice for like $6, and I'd get a can of beans. And so I'd just make enough rice and beans.
You were a vegan back then as well?
Yeah. So okay. I was raised vegetarian, and then I went vegan probably about 18 years ago because I had really developed like some very severe dairy allergies and some inflammation that they caught off of an MRI after being knocked out in a fight. They're like, why isn't this inflammation going away? It turned out it was like the dairy was like swelling me from the inside out really bad. So as soon as I got rid of the dairy, it's just like totally changed my life. So yeah, so after the judo thing and I was kickboxing, I saw UFC 1. I was one of the few people that wasn't impressed with UFC 1. Because I'm looking at it, I'm like going, where are the wrestlers and where are the kickboxers? Like I'm looking at this guy, there's a guy in the ring with one boxing glove. I'm like, the fuck is it? What? One boxing glove?
Art Jimison.
Yeah, and there's no disrespect to the man himself, but nobody was allowed to wrap their hands. You couldn't wear wrestling shoes. They didn't allow wrestlers, right? Because Horion claimed that wrestling was not a martial art, which it wasn't true. It's just if you understand the history of the Gracies, they were always being beaten by wrestlers back in the day. So why would you want a wrestler that's going to defeat your style when that's what they were known to do? Nobody could wear a gi, like a full gi besides hoists. And, there was all these weird rules. And I wasn't impressed. Back then, my parents had what was called a black box. So they were getting all these kind of illegal streams and channels from all over the world. And my dad had all these videos of Judo. So I saw Judo and all this Japanese wrestling before UFC 1. And I was like, those guys are way better than what the UFC was. Because I was training with some of the best guys in the world. I was like, why isn't Don the Dragon Wilson in UFC 1? And he's commentating. He's like going, I'll do it if somebody asks me to do it. Of course, they don't want somebody that level of kickboxing in. Why wasn't Dennis Alessio in? Why wasn't Dave Schultz in? Because it's before Dave Schultz died. And we were talking about it. Imagine if had Dave Schultz gone against Hoist Gracie. Hoist wouldn't have made it out of the round. He wouldn't have made it out of the first round. Why wasn't Kenny Monday put in? You look at all the best guys that were around at that time. You're telling me you couldn't have asked Kenny Monday to come in or Dave Schultz? Fuck, Dave Schultz, that animal. God bless him. He would have wrestled anybody. He didn't care. You thrown him in there. He'd be like, dude, this is easy money. And I can get 50,000 at the end. No problem. That'd have been a quick night for him. So I wasn't impressed because I saw hacks in there. Because I knew the level. I was competitively kickboxing at the time. I knew the level of competitive kickboxing that was out there. I knew guys that were training even in Thailand that were coming back and showing us stuff from Thailand in the mid 90s and how good they were. And I was like, any of these guys would have wrecked shop. But they didn't. They got like big fat guys from all over the place that was just like, these were not professional fighters. They weren't. And so that disturbed me about UFC 1. So 1994, a friend of mine, he said, hey, you got to go check out in the Valley, this guy, or somewhere in LA, the RCJ Machado. It's jiu-jitsu. I'm like, what is this? Like the Hoist Gracie guy? He's like, no. It's like they're relatives. It's a different style. I'm like, yeah, whatever. I'll go check it out. So in I go with, they're like, okay, well, we have these rules. You can't do this. You can't do that. I'm like, okay, whatever. So I come in with my judo double weave. So for those who don't know, a judo double weave is so fucking heavy. It's like a winter coat. Okay. And so it's the middle of the summer, 1994. I'm in the Valley. It's God knows how many 100 degrees something. I'm wearing my judo double weave. And they loved it. I'm coming in, judo black belt, blah, blah, blah. And this guy comes in, blue belt, jiu-jitsu guy. And they're saying, okay, you can't do this, can't do that. Takes me down. He gets on top and chokes me with the gi. And he does it again. I was like, fuck this. I go, you won't let me kick him. You won't let me do this. Let me do that. And I was like, yeah, I mean, come on. So I called bullshit, but at the same time, the Newaza, which was not influenced, was not a focus on the judo school, the judo club I was part of when I was growing up. The Newaza, the ground game, was superior to anything I had seen. So it's like I gotta learn that. But at the time, what people also need to understand is you couldn't just get a jiu-jitsu gi. Okay. This is before the internet. So the jiu-jitsu gis, you could only buy it at the school and you could only get it if you signed up. So they weren't letting people just have jiu-jitsu gis. And I wasn't, in 94, I wasn't ready to sign up. I'm like, fuck this. A friend of mine takes me to this other place. There was a wrestling gym, more like a dungeon, in the middle of LA. And it was all these old Iranian former Olympic champions.
Wow.
Old dudes, barrel chest. Like these guys are like beasts. Okay.
That is
like literally animals, old men. And they proceeded, and we didn't have a gi on. And they're like, okay, you want to start training? Because when California started doing the Pankration tournaments, MMA was not legal. So I wanted to do the Pankration, but that included wrestling. I was like, I need to get my wrestling, but this jiu-jitsu thing, always in the back of my mind was I need to beat jiu-jitsu because I didn't like the arrogance of the people that I originally met. So I was always in the back of my mind, okay, I need to beat jiu-jitsu. So I was just wrestling with these Iranian guys. And it was just like they had the big clubs and all this. And so like, okay, well, I didn't know practice was 3.5 hours and the first 90 minutes was their conditioning. So what the fuck? And these guys are like 60 years old and they are just out conditioning me like nobody's business. There's no air conditioning. It's a dark room, like in the middle of a strip mall. Like it was so creepy. It was so fucking weird. They had this, like the drums going and this Iranian music. And it was so wild and it was sweaty and there was like a ring in there and then the mats. And that was it. And then they had like I don't know what it's called. You know that like wooden bar that they have with the 2 blocks and you do those push-ups? They have like this bar that they use. Anyways, so it was like all this stuff. So by the time we were done with the conditioning, I was already dead. Then they're like, okay, now it's time to move around the mat. And these fuckers, man, all of them look like lions with the size of their hands, their paws and everything. I couldn't even handle their clubbing. They're clubbing me because I didn't have a good wrestling stance. Yeah, I had my judo stance, but you miniature upright like that and they're clubbing you and I'm falling over and then they grab my legs. I was like, dude, okay, I got to figure this out. So I spent a lot of time doing that. And I'd say like once a month, I'd go to like the jiu-jitsu school to try it out again. And okay, I get stuck in a triangle. I'm coming back. I'll be back. That was always the thing, right? So I took off late 90s. I took off to India for 2 years. I come back and there's this thing called the internet. So I'm like, all right, now I'm just going to take grappling full time. And jiu-jitsu by that time was starting to gain some steam. Right. And I was like, okay, I just need to go down and do this. So I went over there. I started training at the Machado Academy full time. And then I switched over to Chris Haueter. Just because for me, it was much easier to just train with an American that like we were just more aligned. And I saw that there was a lot of favoritism in the Brazilian schools. Like they definitely, it was just like, if you could help them become a celebrity, they favorited you. If you could give them lots of money, they favorited you. Or if you were Brazilian, they favorited you. So if you were just some regular guy that could just afford to pay, the tuition and nothing else, then they're like, yeah, whatever. There was no attention on you. So I didn't want to be around that. I wanted to be around somebody that's actually going to make me better. And so that's how I kind of found my sensei, so to speak. That's how I found Chris Haueter. And then it kind of just took off from there. And then I already knew about catch wrestling, and I had reached out to somebody and be like, hey, you want to train some catch wrestling? The guy's like, no, I just want to do pro wrestling. You come do pro wrestling with me. And who will remain nameless. But this was maybe 2003. He was doing a bunch of pro wrestling. And I said, he wanted to highlight catch wrestling to legitimize pro wrestling. And I wanted to highlight catch wrestling and work on catch wrestling to enhance my grappling for fighting. So it's two very different mindsets. So what ended up happening is over the course of the last 20 years, there's a particular individual out there that only used catch wrestling, who'd really never grappled a day in their life, used catch wrestling as a platform to legitimize his first love, which is pro wrestling. And those of us that actually train catch wrestling for fighting have kind of been in the background going, no, that doesn't work. That doesn't work. That doesn't work. So when you hear people say, well, catch wrestling doesn't work. Well, if you look at what this guy's doing, yeah, that's bullshit. He's teaching pro wrestling, again, show holds, which it has its place, but don't say you're teaching catch. It's a different thing.
I think you just hit it on the nail, the hammer on the nail. I think so. I actually have nothing against pro wrestling, and I do think maybe there's something of a place. It's kind of like it's nice to know, but you got. I mean, it's like a toothless lion, clawless lion. You're declawing the lion, and then just saying. I mean, a declawed lion is going to fight completely different than a lion with claws and teeth. Absolutely. This is what I think the big issue is right now with catch, and I think it's very hard to market it when the base, like you're marketing to, thinks that it's pro wrestling.
Yeah,
and I think this is what, if catch can get over that. And I'm sure it will. It's just a matter of time. I think it's going to be mainstream. The question's when, and I think it'll happen definitely now because you see in the no-gi, everyone's getting into wrestling, and the rule set's not allowing too much passivity, at least in CJI, as well as because of the wrestling, the top game is much more prevalent. Which right now in no-gi, the big difference is because the top game has become, due to wrestling, more prevalent. I mean, obviously, if there's top, there's a bottom. But the bottom game is also developing too. But right now, you're seeing that it's developing not to keep someone in the guard, but to escape and counter and get up to the feet and throw them again. And as time goes by, I just think catch is going to... I don't know if people go to catch. It'll just kind of combine and evolve as catch. But... I mean, what do I know?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. What we see in the tournaments today is very much, it's still sporty because they don't have the perspective of strikes in mind. That's why you don't see a lot of these guys doing well in MMA. It's very hard to transition if... that's why even Gordon Ryan said that he thought the best grappling art for MMA was combat sambo because it's already ready to go. I would say it's catch wrestling. But combat sambo takes a lot from catch wrestling. So it's not something I would necessarily disagree with. But if you had combat catch wrestling, where you're doing the old rough and tumble stuff, where you're using strikes and catch like that, basic strikes and catch, that would be the most dominant of all. Just because the way we pin joints, it's just like, it's brutal. And the level of pain compliance that exists within catch wrestling does not exist in jiu-jitsu. And I watch everything, and I go, okay, because I'm always analyzing. Billy Robinson used to say, you have to learn how to learn. Billy was open to anything and everything because he would say, okay, here's how you would learn how to counter this, or here's how this would work, or why it's not working, or how it could work better. So that mindset of learning how to learn is you have to have an open mind. Because I asked some catch guys, well, what do you watch? What grapples do you like? Well, I don't watch anything. I only watch catch. But why? Watch everything. You're limiting your perspective if you're only watching your quote unquote favorite style. And quite frankly, if you look at somebody that just carries the flag of catch wrestling, not just like somebody just carrying the flag of quote unquote no gi jiu-jitsu, but is catch wrestling. If you go to the British Catch Wrestling Championships, the World Championship, they call it the World Championships. Number one, they don't allow chokes, which is bullshit. But number two, out of those guys, how many of them are just doing quote unquote catch rules? None of them.
Yeah.
They're doing other things.
I just want to say that just a little bit of a brain fart, I guess you would say, but not having chokes completely changes catch, because now the takedowns will be completely different because you can avoid the guillotine, you can avoid all these chokes. So it's detrimental.
Absolutely.
In a way.
Well, it also, when you look at the turtle and quarters position, referee's position, all that, imagine going to high defense if you have a choke. You can't. You're going to get your head ripped off. Everything that they're doing in that tournament, they allow cranks, but I always set cranks as that's part one. So I have 3 levels, right? I have crank 1, crank 2, and then the strangle. So I teach it in a sequential order. So if one doesn't work, you go to the next part, right? So I have step 1 is I call it the ski goggles, which is above the nose. It's like if you wear ski goggles, that's where you would start your first crank. Number 2 is under the nose. Between the nose and the jaw, that's number 2.
Yeah.
Okay? Brutal.
Yeah, that's
break your teeth,
definitely.
Break your jaw, break the nose, right? So that's number 2. Number 3 is under the neck, or under the jaw, at the neck, right? So you have 3 attacks. Imagine if you take those attacks out. So if you're just limiting yourself to just some type of neck crank, you're limiting a tremendous opportunity of sliding that hand down and going in for a choke, short choke, a long choke. I personally prefer short chokes to long chokes. So I tend to focus on teaching short chokes because they're quicker. I think they're more efficient and more high percentage than long chokes. And what I mean by that, in case somebody in the audience is like going, what does he mean short choke or long choke? It has nothing to do with duration of time. It has to do with the distance of your arm to the neck. So a long choke would be primarily focused on your forearm, wrapping the carotid artery, what they call a rear naked choke, or the Mate Leon, where your elbow is basically down on the chest and then your back arm is crossed behind the head, right? That's a long choke, meaning your arms are long. But those are pretty easy to defend. There's a lot of space there where you can turn, twitch, shuck yourself out. There's a lot of places to hand fight versus a short choke, which is more of an airway choke instead of a carotid choke. And I could still do a carotid choke with a short choke, but basically what it is my wrist blade. Since we're on video, I can actually show this. Where's the camera? So this part right here, see this here? This is what's actually choking. So this is what I'm cutting with. So I'm using what I call it the blade. Some people call it the cutting bone, whatever. So we use that blade. So from that wrist joint down, it's about 2 inches. It's 2, 3 inches of space. Use that to cut somebody. It's quicker and it's meaner and it's fast, and you don't have the time to defend. And they could be hanging on your arm all they want. The way we cut it and we turn it, it ends quickly. So, yeah, I mean, the style now, when I see the sport jiu-jitsu, even when we talked about this, the CJI, which to me was super fun, but the guys that are just literally laying there and praying guard, dude, if you get hit in the head, you're done.
Oh, yeah.
You always have to keep the strikes in mind. It's fun to watch. Look, I enjoyed watching it. I like seeing, okay, what techniques can I pick up? What are they doing? I like to see what people are doing. But 90% of what I see can be solved. The riddle can be solved with joint pins and foot control. And I'm not seeing that. Guys rotate on the bottom because nobody's pinning them. And it's not necessarily just a cross-side pin. I can pin your knee and you won't go anywhere. And I can pin your foot to the floor. If I pin your bottom knee and I pin your top foot to the floor, you're not going anywhere. If I cross-face you, you're not going anywhere. If I cradle you, you're not going anywhere. These are basic things. This is basic wrestling techniques that if you actually use wrestling techniques, elementary, if you used basic wrestling techniques in this instead of playing the jiu-jitsu game, you would do better. You know, I look at it and go, give me one of these guys. Like Nicky Rod's fantastic. Already won $1 million, isn't that? The one thorn in his side that he has is he hasn't beaten Gordon Ryan, and I know he can't. I need Nicky Rod for a week, and he will beat Gordon Ryan 10 times out of 10.
Nicky, you hear that?
Okay.
We got to get you there.
I need him for a week. It's the same. I could take any of those guys, like Pat Downey, really amazing grappler.
That guy's amazing. Yeah.
Dude, okay. And I was talking to him because he wants to come out and do a seminar at my school, which I would love for him to do. But the thing is, get this. Now, here's how stupid jiu-jitsu is, okay? Watch this. He just entered the IBJJF no-gi worlds as a blue belt.
I saw that. And I was like, what did I say? The awakening is about to come, boys. You know, like,
okay,
Pat Downey. Like, oh, my God.
Like, seriously? Now, the only time I saw something this retarded, and it's not about Pat Downey, he's following the rules, okay? There isn't a blue belt on this planet that's making it out alive within 30 seconds of Pat Downey. They're not making it out. I'm sorry. It's not happening. He's going to wreck the shit out of all of them. Now, I'm going to tell you, the other time I saw this, I don't remember what year it was. It was, do you know who Phil Davis is?
Yeah, of course.
He's an NCAA champion. The year he won his senior title, me and Chris Haueter are at the No-Gi Worlds, and we're sitting there. And Hauter's like, who's that? I'm like, what the fuck? I go, it's Phil Davis. Mind you, he's tall, he's really wide, and he's got the tiniest waist you've ever seen in your life. He's got like a 24-inch waist, maybe. Teeny tiny waist, and like big V taper.
Like a swimmer almost, you know?
Yeah, like a swimmer. They entered this motherfucker as a blue belt in the No-Gi Worlds. Stupid ass IBJJF. You should have seen everybody was flying through the air. Woo, woo, everybody's flying off the mat. I was just like, I'm laughing. I'm like, come on. Seriously? And then 6 months later, you know, he signs the UFC or whatever. I'm like, why? Yeah, I'm sorry, dude. Pat, I love you. You're definitely coming to a seminar at the school. Phil Davis, I love you. You're amazing. You guys are both expert grapplers. Stop. You know, I know, yes, IBJJF, who's, no, you really, if maybe blue belt, fuck that shit. You guys are expert grapplers. You know, it is insulting to the wrestler, these jiu-jitsu motherfuckers, pardon my language, that they're going, oh, you can enter as a blue belt, even though you're a fucking world champion grappler. Come on. What is this?
I think it's a strategy because what happens if they enter in the black belt and just clean it up? I mean, that's even, and
so be it. It's good.
In tournaments that could
help everybody.
Very true. But there is something to say. I mean, Pat Downey, I mean, his specific style, it's also like you're not going to have an easy wrestling match. Let's say that he's kind of a bully style, which is good. Like he comes he comes there to smash you, right?
And that's another guy. I want to train with him. I just want to show him some stuff, some catch. I just need a week with him. The guy's already. This is like what I say to everybody. You're already an expert grappler. You made the cupcake. I just want to add the sprinkles on top of the cupcake.
Yeah,
and that's going to be the beauty of it. I just want to contribute the sprinkles. Because the way that I show catch wrestling, Pat Downey with a catch wrestling arsenal, nobody's stopping that guy. Okay? Nicky Rod, with a catch wrestling arsenal to counter the catch wrestling that Gordon Ryan is learning from John Danaher, even though Danaher doesn't want to say he's teaching him catch. He's beating Gordon Ryan repeatedly. I'm telling you now, repeatedly. It's basic stuff, and it's stuff not like, oh, you just want me to do a double wrist lock like this. No, I need to show you the joint pins. I need to show you the skeletal attacks. I need to show you just a couple transitions that are going to change what you're doing. I want to show you the steering wheel off the foot. Just like little things that are going to change it. Stop falling to your ass to a leg lock. This needs to stop. This, like, I understand, okay, leg locks are cool. Yeah, everybody's, dude, I was doing leg locks 20 years ago when nobody was allowed to do leg locks. There wasn't a lot of us doing leg locks. You know, so the leg lock thing, you know, it's annoying because they're using it in a jiu-jitsu pattern, which is sit on your ass, go into 50-50 guard. That's dumb. You know, you do a leg lock from the top position. Don't sit on your back. Stay in the top position at all times. They're getting too comfortable on their backs. This is what I say.
Then they transition to MMA, and this is where
and they get smashed.
Yeah. And they could actually be the guys smashing. It's just about the procedure, the linear rules that they're following.
Yes.
Very interesting. Do you think a guy like Pat Downey and Nicky Rod, I mean, for them to learn catch would be, I mean, it'd be so fast because catch is very
a week.
It's folk style in a way, right?
I just need, it is, but it's just, there's certain things that are done because even folk style, the way folk style's evolved in the last 120 years, gets a lot of things wrong positionally because it leaves you open for submissions.
Okay, got you.
So there are things this is what happens when we talked about this on, the Level Up Grappling Podcast about the morphology of grappling based on the rule set. Right? I hate to use that term evolution or devolution because it's just morphing. It's just morphology.
I agree.
But when you look at its morphology, the rule set of folk style exposes you.
Okay.
You're exposed to certain submissions and certain attacks and joint pins that you wouldn't be exposed to if you had a little bit of a catch wrestling perspective.
Specifically, the double wrist lock is...
Absolutely.
Right
double
there.
Wrist lock, the
Guillotine.
Front face lock off the guillotine, the front face lock off the single leg, the way that they expose their neck on a single leg, the head on double leg, one of the worst things you can do if you're doing submission grappling. You got to cut an angle. If you're not cutting an angle on your leg attacks, you're really missing the boat. There's too many defenses. And the other thing that they're doing incorrectly, I see a lot of, is if they attempt to down block at all on a sprawl, they're down blocking on the outside, so they're over the top of the shoulders instead of on the inside of the shoulders. You should always be down blocking on the inside to wrap the neck. I mean, it should be automatic. We train this maniacally at my school, where we're just drilling the shit out of down block on the inside, wrap the neck. Down block on the inside, front headlock to half ouch, half ouch to submission, whatever. Set your pin, cow catcher to pin. So there's things that you have to do technically different. So you're in an attacking submission perspective, right? You have to be in that attacking submission perspective. The minute Pat Downey and Nicky Rod get out of the sport jiu-jitsu mindset and understand that catch wrestling is the origin of their submissions and is the origin of their real grappling style, they'll be unstoppable. And it's not going to take, I need a week with each of them. A week. I can teach them everything in a week, probably less. Or maybe even in a day.
I think you're 100%. I'm not saying it's because we're friends, but I think you're right. Someone asked me months ago, before the CJA, who is the guy who I could see to really beating a Hamzat. Okay. And me and a couple of guys, although, I mean, Pat Downey's a world-class wrestler, but he's not Sadulayev, right?
Yeah.
But I think that if he he has done MMA. The fight I saw of his, it seemed like he didn't take it so seriously, maybe, and maybe not have the right camp. But if he had the right camp, that guy can decimate everybody. He has the mentality. He's got the type of wrestling that he's just a bully.
Yeah.
And that guy is honestly, if he would, I'm not the guy to tell him where to do it or whatever, but he would have to have the proper stand-up guy who could mix it properly with his wrestling and I think the catch. Obviously, I think he needs to do a little bit of jiu-jitsu to know what he's dealing with, especially in the guard. You have to.
Well, that's understand. Where, yeah, I agree with you. That's where I feel like my style, how I would be able to coach him, would work because I have the balanced perspective. I can teach both at the same time. It's not homogeneous. So I can give him a much more blended approach and a blended perspective versus an isolated perspective.
Yeah, he's going to smash that guy. I'm telling you. He's the guy that he would go very far in MMA, especially in a cage. It's a different thing. Now,
it is.
I have a question. You have a school, you teach.
Yeah.
Do any of your guys go to MMA yet, or is it more focused towards the grappling?
Just focused towards the grappling. I've had a couple people ask me, but to me, there's so much you have to learn. It takes time. I'm not the type of guy that just, okay, here, you learn some punches and kicks. Let me hold the mitts for you. Okay, let's go get you a fight. No. If I don't have your footwork down, if I don't have your movement down, if I don't have your defense down first, there's not even a discussion of a fight.
Yeah.
You have to know, you have to be so, in my opinion, people are rushed into fights too soon without having basic mechanics. Your foundation of everything that you're doing should be your mechanics, your footwork, your fundamental movements. If you don't have that, why are you fighting? Most of these amateur fights that I see are so fucking sloppy. They're so sloppy. And it's just like, this is bad coaching. I care for the people that I train. And a bunch of them, they do Dutch kickboxing training with me. And, I've had a couple say, I want to fight. Well, talk to me in 2 years.
Yeah,
you want to fight,
yeah.
You have to look. You're not training once a week. If you want to fight, you need to be on the mat with me 6 days a week.
Yeah.
Okay. And we have to build a program. We have to build a plan. There's a lot to do. You're not just fighting just on a whim. If you want to fight on a whim, you're not wearing my shirt. And I'm not going to be there. I'm sorry. Because I do not agree with that type of irresponsible, just jumping into a cage. Reason why I was, if you look at the history of how I was fighting back in the day, in the 90s, number one, I started with kickboxing. That was my bread and butter. I'm a striker first. So I started with kickboxing. I had so many fucking kickboxing matches, right? It's just like when you're doing kickboxing stuff, you may have 3 or 4 matches in one day. And then the next week you may have 8 because then this tournament's going. And then you have some on Saturday, some on Sunday, and then whatever. So maybe you lose half of them. Maybe you lose 80% of them, whatever, but you're still just you're fighting over and over and over again. So by the time I went from kickboxing to pankration, I already had years of kickboxing under my belt. Footwork, movement, hand positioning.
Body mechanics,
head movement,
everything.
Body mechanics. Yeah. And then when you think of the hours I spent before I even got into the pankration stuff, the hours I spent with those Iranian wrestlers, just getting the shit kicked out of me. These guys are taking me down left and right in the conditioning and the just understanding how to move my body.
They must have loved you, though.
Still get taken down. Oh, they loved me.
Loved you.
They're like, this guy's crazy. He keeps coming back. And they put the hurt on me, boy, let me tell you. But people don't come back from that. You have to be psychotic to come back. That's why the people that train with me, I love them because they're psychotic. Not everybody trains with me. I don't want the biggest school. I want like Gene LaBelle. Like maybe if by the time I'm dead and gone, maybe I have 12 black belts. That's it.
Like Holmes Gracie.
Yeah. It's just like, I don't need fucking 3,000 black belts because I go, there's no way that I conditioned 3,000 people. There's no way. They didn't learn from me. If it's 3,000 black belts under me, they didn't learn from me. I'm too anal retentive. I'm too aggressive with my coaching and my instruction to be that watered down. It doesn't work that way. Because I'm like Billy, man. Billy Robinson was. I'm like how Chris Haueter was. The attention to detail
Yeah.
is very, very, very significant. And I'm not going to lose that on just like, oh, let's see. Again, I don't make money off of this. You know, I coach because I love it, because I feel like I have an obligation to pass on real submission grappling to people. You know,
Which
what
you are.
I've learned from the best in the world. Yeah, that's my job.
Now, I want to ask, I mean, we're getting close to the end, but I want to ask a very interesting question I wanted to ask you for quite a while. Every martial artist, every grappler, every wrestler has influences. And I'm not talking about people who just teach you, maybe people you saw or fighters you saw. Who are your influences? Who are the ones who you said, wow, that's the guy. I want to be like that?
I think for at least my generation, the first was Bruce Lee. It was Bruce Lee, Chuck Norris, and then grappling, it was Gene LaBelle. You know, because I was a kid growing up, seeing the stuff and reading the stories of Gene LaBelle. Carl Gotch. There was a lot of old stuff. Lou Thez, because I got to see the old catch wrestlers. So I saw videos of Lou Thez wrestling.
Yeah.
So that was big on me. And then obviously Bas Rutten from the kickboxing, Dennis Alessio, the Rufus brothers, Benny the Jet Urquidez. You know, there's like more my striking. Rob Kamen, Ernesto Hust. I mean, really, primarily is like kickboxers, because that's really kind of like what my background was. The grappling, obviously Billy, but see, I never watched any of Billy's matches. I just saw him as a coach, and same thing. Chris Haueter was my huge influence, but he was just a coach. Grappling influences. If we break down into actual wrestling, like let's say amateur wrestling, the Schultz brothers, for me, right? Karelin. So let's go Schultz brothers, Karelin, Kenny Monday, Cale Sanderson, even though I think he's younger than me, but still, nevertheless, huge influence on me. Who else? Pat Smith, Dan Gable. If I just think of like who are like all like the real like killers, Sachievs were just amazing. The submission guys that I really saw something special. Josh Barnett, Eric Paulson. Barnett probably the biggest, just because, you know, it's like the catch base, but he does everything. And the fact that he goes and puts on a gi and then spanks all the guys in the gi is great. He's a good guy. And it's like people I felt, Higan Machado, from just grappling perspective. And then MMA, oof. It's hard because, I mean, so many people, like, I loved Mighty Mouse is great. That guy was just, like, to me, one of the most complete fighters.
Oh, yeah.
John Jones, even though I'm not impressed with him as a person, but as a fighter, complete fighter. DC, Daniel Cormier, holy shit. One of my favorites of all time.
Yeah.
I just pick up wherever I can. You know, it's just like, you know, I just look at stuff and I go, okay, what can I learn from this person? You know, I'm always looking for subtle nuances. I'm not looking for necessarily, okay, who did what. I mean, to me, you know, really when I was growing up, there really wasn't a whole lot. I mean, obviously there was a lot of great Japanese pro wrestlers. Fujiwara, one of my coaches. But really overall, I think the ones that impressed me the most were the Schultz brothers. For me, they were just
as good as it
so
gets.
Violent. They were just so violent. I don't think people realize just how mean those guys were. Not in a bad way.
No,
but also
like they needed
cross
to be.
training. They needed to be. Just the cross training and the fact that I grew up in the 80s, right? So, you know, when you grow up in the 80s, you're a red-blooded American. I was a Reagan American, Ronald Reagan American. USA #1, you know, it's just like, when I was watching WWF back in the day, it's just like, you know, it's just like, it was the Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov versus, you know, Hulk Hogan. As much as I hated Hulk Hogan as a wrestler, it was still, we had that USA pride, right? So, I went to the 84 Olympics.
Oh, man.
We're in
You
LA.
know, growing up in North Canada, I had that USA pride too. We were
Right?
Reagan guys, you know?
Yeah,
Goonies
so-
and like Red Dawn
Yes.
and all the, you know what I mean?
So to me, it's just like the guys. Oh, Kurt Angle. How could I forget Kurt Angle? Jesus Christ, the guy wins an Olympic gold medal with a broken neck. Sorry, Kurt. Didn't mean to forget you there. I did not. But
yeah,
look at what I got to grow up with in terms of wrestling influence.
Oh yeah,
from the Americans. Schultz brothers, Kenny Monday, you know, Kurt Angle, and then Cale Sanderson. Jesus Christ. Brock. People don't realize what a good wrestler Brock Lesnar was. You know, they think, oh, WWE. No. Dude I saw him in person before. I didn't realize how big that guy was. It wasn't a tall thing. I've just never seen anybody so thick and wide in my life.
he likes his steak.
All muscle. It was so bizarre. It was so bizarre to see a human. And I kid you not, he was 6 feet away from me. To see a human that thick and wide, it was bizarre looking. I mean, he's not the tallest guy. He's taller than me. I think he's maybe 6'3" or something like that. But it's just the thickness and the width.
Yeah.
And seeing him stand next to somebody that's, say, 7 feet tall, and he makes them look small.
It's like a modern Viking, like what
Yeah,
you would think of a Viking.
odd. It was a very odd look.
Like 800 years ago, you understand. Like
No.
I would understand. I'm like, okay, like he's basically, I'm dead. You know, like that's.
Oh yeah. It's just, you know, and you look at some of those guys. Imagine, I just keep going. I always go back for some reason. I always just go back to the Schultz brothers. You know, the greatest tragedy. You know, Dave Schultz getting murdered the way that he did in '96, and the effect it had. Not just like the wrestling world, but what the potential effect it could have had, positive effect it could have had on MMA, had he pursued MMA.
Oh yeah,
You know,
I agree.
and had Mark been allowed to continue MMA, and he wasn't. I think that those two guys would have been some of the greatest representatives of American mixed martial arts we would have ever seen.
Absolutely.
And two of my literally, probably my top favorite, them two and Carell, my 3 favorite wrestlers of all time. For me, just like that brutal
Amazing.
style. Yeah, you know.
Amazing. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the submission grappling guys, yeah, I watch it all the time, but I don't look at any of it and going, oh, I want to be like this guy. Because I just don't see it. I don't see it today. I really don't see a lot of expressions of submission grappling that inspire me to go, oh my God, this is I got to get out and do that.
All the guys you said, what's interesting, because everyone said, oh, he said the top guys. Well, it wasn't really that. They all have something in common, is that they're very straightforward in what they do, no messing around, and decimators.
Yeah.
You know, nothing really fancy, but they come to decimate, which is your mentality, you know?
Yeah.
But for sure. Those are some great picks, especially the Schultz brothers. I mean, I think people don't understand how, I mean, obviously folk style wrestlers do, especially the older guys, but the new generation, especially guys who don't wrestle, have no clue of the natural aptitude they have towards the human body and being able to manipulate it to position it wherever they want.
Mm-hmm.
And they were just, and what a tragedy, you know?
You know, what scares me, or it also just kind of saddens me, is how many wrestlers I talk to today that don't know who the Schultz brothers are.
Yeah,
it blows my mind, because I go, okay, you know the Schultz headlock? They're like, what? I'm like, okay, you know Dave Schultz, what he was doing? They're like, who? Like, what? Wait, how long you been wrestling for? How old are you? I'm like, okay, you're 40 years old. You're 35 years old. You say you're a wrestler and you've been wrestling since high school or junior high, whatever, and you don't know who Dave Schultz is.
It's like a basketball player not knowing who Michael Jordan is or Magic Johnson.
It just makes it. How do you have to study, especially when there's videotape on these people? You have to study that shit and understand the level of technique. What I always say is, like, these guys were cross training with the best guys in the world. They were, like you were saying before we started, right? You know, these guys were training with the Russians. They were training everywhere. That cross training. That's the other thing that really bothers me about jiu-jitsu. They don't cross train. You know, with these wrestlers, everybody cross trains. Judokas, everybody cross trains. Yeah, somebody from Kazakhstan's coming over to train in Japan versus train in USA.
All the time.
Everybody's cross training all the time.
All the time.
It's a given.
And it's actually,
it's mandatory. You have to cross train to get better. You know, fuck, man, they have no idea how good the Schultz brothers were. You know, they don't know who they are. I'm like, you don't understand this grip. I'm showing you this grip because of what Mark Schultz did to people. Huh? What's who? Oh, fuck. Really? Okay. Here's your next homework assignment. Go watch every video you can on the Schultz brothers. Then come back to me and ask questions like, oh, now I know why you did this particular takedown this way. Now I understand this particular sweep. Yes. You have to learn it.
I agree. You know, I get, because I make a lot of video content, as I'm very passionate about grappling. The weirdest messages I get, I'm always open to any message, especially my favorite are when I'm wrong, because I'm wrong a lot. I'm an older guy, you know, I'm starting to lose a little bit of the brain here. But people seeing like guys who are maybe from the 70s or 80s saying, yeah, you know, an average kid in California would just beat him in high school. I'm like, no, man, this guy is really good. You're not beating Levan Teriashvili, a high school kid from, you know, Palo Alto. It's not happening. It's just, I just can't, it's a weird world we live in. And maybe it's a sign that we are getting older. And, you know, everyone says, I'm afraid to get older. You know, the great thing about becoming older is we become wiser and more experienced. And if you look at it that way, it's a very beautiful thing. Yes, the back hurts. You know, today, I'm not even kidding you. I pulled my back in the shower trying to scratch my balls. I mean, that was a low life. If you talked about catch wrestling, grabbing the balls in order to submit, I think I just proved you right there, man. You know?
No, there you go.
You know, the wife's like, how do you do that? She's like, you're pathetic. I know, but I guess it's the passing of the age. Bryan.
I don't take that. I don't take anything away from people I've learned from. You know, it's just like, it's amazing. Yeah. I'm so grateful. Yeah.
So, Bryan, I think this has been phenomenal to get to see your viewpoints and stuff, especially in catch. Tell us what you usually tell us, but I'm going to tell you what's going on. Like, how can people see you? What's new? Give us some good news.
Yeah. So, all right. So we got the PCI Jiujitsu page. It's just, if you go to Instagram at PCI Jiujitsu. I'm considering putting more technique content on there. I'm always hesitant to put that on. I don't know why. It's just because I've had issues with that in the past. People, you know, doing stuff. So I don't know. If somebody wants to see something specific, hit me up and I'll show it technically. Level Up Grappling Podcast, which Grapplezilla is a regular co-host on. So that's Level Up _Grappling on Instagram. Eventually, Grapplezilla is going to teach me how to put it on YouTube so I can have it on there as well. I regularly do catch wrestling clinics at my school. So I don't know when this is coming out, but I got one coming up November 16th at my school. It's called Killer Cradles. So it's all going to be about cradles for pinning, punishment, and submission. And then November 20th, I'll be in Phoenix, Arizona, Jay Page's Academy, hanging out there. I'm planning to do hopefully we'll do an Instagram live for Level Up Grappling there. So we'll hang out with everybody at the gym and do an Instagram live. Maybe I'll get on the mat a little bit, show some stuff. So we'll see. Depends on what kind of mood Jay Pages is in. And then I coach always for the ACWA National Championships, which is the American Catch Wrestling Association, Josh Barnett's organization. I do everything I can to support Josh Barnett and his endeavors. So that's December 22nd in Brea, California, North Orange County. So I always encourage people to come and train with me. I do something before every tournament, which is very unique. If you are not a student of mine, you can come and train with me for free up to the time of the tournament. That's still going on now. And I will pay for your entry. I will sponsor your entry into the tournament. The rules are you have to show up to train, and you can't just come whenever you want. You have to come multiple days a week, and you have to compete in the tournament. But I can't make it any easier than that. February 8th and 9th in 2025, we are having the Snake Pit USA 2-day winter camp. So that'll be me and Joel Bain. I think it's 11 hours. So I think it starts at 9:30 in the morning, and we go to like 9:30 to 4 each day, something like that. So that'll be like 2 days worth of catch wrestling. And yeah, I got a lot of stuff coming up. I'll have Chris Haueter back out. I know Pat Downey, me and Pat Downey were talking about having him come out for a seminar at the gym. So we've got a lot of stuff happening in 2025. And I'm always available for seminars anywhere in the world. It's not expensive, guys. I try and keep this as reasonable as possible. Get me a plane ticket, find me some vegan food, and a place to sleep. That's all you have to do. And I promise you the cost of the seminar or clinic is less expensive, more reasonable than anything else you'll find out there. And it's stuff that'll add to your arsenal, regardless of what style of grappling that you do. But yeah, check it out and come listen to us and just come get on the mat. And at the end of the day, don't be a pussy, right? That's what I always say. Just come do it. Look, I always say this. I tap every day. I have no idea how many times I've tapped in the last 30 years. But I can tell you the people that have like truly just beaten my ass and like taken my soul, it's like 5 people. Okay. And that's a good thing. You want to learn from the best in the world. Don't be afraid to tap. And you should be tapping early and often. Stop trying to escape out of impossible positions. Just tap. Be done with it. Okay. Just have fun. Get on the mat and learn. Stop trying to beat everybody. How am I going to win if I do this? No. Get on the mat and learn and drill the shit out of everything. Okay. Drill, and drill. Have your fundamentals down. If you don't know footwork, if you don't know hand fighting, if you don't know proper movement, okay, proper mechanics, start over. And I also do online coaching. So if you want to do online coaching, hit me up at PCI Jiujitsu or Level Up _Grappling, and we can talk about it. And that's it, man.
Now, I'm going to say something, and I have not been paid for this, and would never accept. Whatever Bryan's saying, I actually do agree. I've seen his stuff. He's sent some videos because I had some technical questions. And the guy knows his stuff. He really is there. I also have access. I mean, I always grapple and everything. I'm very good at tapping, getting tapped, I mean. And I can tell you Bryan's stuff would tap me. No problem. So that said, check out his pages, etc. PCI Jiujitsu, Level Up Grappling Podcast. I'm going to put everything inside the description, etc. And if you have any questions, hit him up. And if you can't reach him, hit me up and I'll try to point you in his direction. And thank you very much. If you could like and subscribe and share this and get the good word out, I appreciate it. Have a great day from Grapplezilla. Grab, throw, and tap.